This should take just a moment. Input device, internal microphone. Oh, okay. Great. Apparently, if I just go into the settings and don't do anything, it works. Thank you, Microsoft. Okay. So, yay. Okay. So I'm monitoring the chat now. So anybody who has a comment or question remotely, just type it in the chat, and I'll look over there every so often, and hopefully I pick it up. So, yeah, Satan lies to himself throughout Paradise Lost, and it's. I think it's intended by Milton to be kind of a comical aspect of Satan, if such a thing is possible. Um, so, let's see. Okay, so starting at farewell, happy fields, he's saying goodbye, happy fields, heaven, where joy lives forever. Hail, horrors, hail, infernal world, and hell, receive your new possessor or possessors, one who brings a mind not to be changed by place or time. So what is Satan saying here? He's not repentant. No matter where he is or when it is, he's the same. He doesn't care. Exactly. He will not repent. He believes he was right in rebelling against God this whole time.
He also knows what he's lost.
Yes.
Happy heaven and.
Yep.
Is he saying that heaven, that his hatred for God is to such an extent that heaven would be hell because he is there?
I think that's a good interpretation of that. Yeah. Where heaven itself is a wonderful place to be, for him, it wouldn't be so great with God in charge. Okay. Oh, I forgot to do something on the live stream. Window. There's screen. That one. There we go. I wasn't sharing that, so it might have been confusing to those on the live stream. Okay, so back to my Word doc. Here we go. He continues on and he says, the mind is its own place and can make a heaven of hell or hell of a heaven or hell of heaven. What does it matter where I am if I am the same as I was and what I should be? So is he saying it's okay that he's in hell? What does it matter where I am? He just lamented the fact that he lost heaven. So he's kind of all over the map here.
Yeah, I'm thinking that he's processing through this experience, and he's trying to come up with some conclusions through rationalization, if you could call it rationalization, because of that line 260 to 3, better to reign in hell than serve in heaven.
Yeah, if you notice that line is highlighted, italicized. I put italics in there because that is probably the most famous line in all of Paradise Lost. But yeah,
he's trying to make.
He's trying to. I don't know if he's trying to sell himself, or if he's just feels that it's better for him to reign or to serve. To reign in hell than to serve in heaven. He would rather have reigned in heaven, but that wasn't going to happen. So.
Being a master deceiver, he's a product of his own delusion.
Yes. Exactly. Which came first? The deceiver or the delusion? Okay, moving on.
As I read it, I thought of that illustration that Tom gave of the little boy and the watch, that he was just gonna do it. You remember on Sunday, he was gonna throw up the watch, even though his dad said, don't throw the, watch at it.
I'm sorry to say I missed Sunday's
Oh.
message.
That's what I thought.
Spoiler! No, I haven't watched it yet. I was actually officiating a wedding, so, but yeah. So I'll watch that, and I'll probably make more sense out of that. Okay, he says, here at least we are free. The Almighty has not built this place to be envied and will not push us from here. So he basically is saying, hey, God didn't make this place for himself. He's not going to come down and push us out. We're just here. Here we may reign secure, and to me, to reign is worth my ambition, though in hell. As such, it's better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. So, I mean, that line, you don't have to interpret it. I mean, it's plain and simple. So, yes.
I was just going to say, I think that Milton just showed incredible insight to why people do go to hell, that they don't want God. Because the only thing that makes heaven heaven is God. God's not there, it's not heaven.
Right.
So if you hate God, you're not going to want to be in heaven.
Well, and if God's not there, heaven won't be what we think it
No,
is.
it's hell.
Yeah.
So people think I want to go to this better place, they don't want God to be there. That
Can't have
doesn't
one without the
exist.
other.
So sometimes you wonder, why would people choose to go to hell? Why don't people repent when they go to hell? They don't stop hating God. Satan still hates God.
Yeah.
He doesn't want heaven because it's God.
Well, and you'll see in the coming chapters that he views paradise different. At first, he doesn't see it as a place to conquer. He sees it as, hey, this is a better place to live. It's like he's moving up in the world. Well,
Could Milton also live into human nature to a certain degree?
absolutely. I mean, he's giving Satan certain human characteristics, which may not be totally inaccurate, but yeah, it kind of anthropomorphizing Satan or making him have human traits makes it more understandable to us.
Yeah. And I think we, as humans, we kind of echoed that many times saying, master of our universe or commander of my destiny.
Mhm.
And all things just kind of echoing this, I'm in charge. I'm in charge. I don't care where I'm going to end up. At least I'm in charge.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Exactly. Yeah, he's deluding himself to even think that he's in charge here.
Right.
He'll find out in later chapters that he really isn't.
I want to ask a question. My understanding of the Bible, Satan isn't in hell. Satan's on the earth. And I've wondered if, as much as I love this poem, if this hasn't led to some very unbiblical beliefs throughout the church throughout the years, because Satan was on earth, never says in the Bible that he was sent to hell. He's going to be sent to the lake of fire
Right.
eventually, but he's on earth,
Right.
right? So
And
Satan, did Milton have a different theology there? Because a lot of people
So
think that
it's
Satan is ruling in hell. Satan doesn't rule hell.
right. There's you have to try to balance between what's biblical and what's poetic. The idea that poets can do pretty much anything they want when they're writing a poem, which is called poetic license. For the purpose of telling a story, he's essentially saying, okay, Satan and his followers were thrown into hell, and then he does the creation, and Satan sees an opportunity. So it's really has to do with the plot, how things occur.
Yeah,
No,
because I agree with that because he did touch on earlier that there is a creature. And to me, that there's a creature coming, that there is something that is coming.
Mhm.
And that I took that to mean he was alluding to man.
Yes.
So this was way before the creation, the 7 day, this was before Genesis.
Well, and the thing to keep in mind is that the spirit world, for lack of a better term, is out of time. It's not
Good point.
in time.
That's right.
So
How do we know that?
God is eternal.
Well, God,
Angels
yes,
are eternal. Demons are eternal.
but we're eternal too.
Yes. Well, believers. Well, actually, everybody is. Just
Very
where you spend eternity, that's the question. But the
I mean, I know God is out of time because he created time. He's out of everything, but how do we know?
so you're
that
right.
the Angels and all of it.
You're right in that angels.
They're not eternal and God is eternal. They were created too.
Well, they were created, so they're eternal moving forward, but not going back. God is
Yeah, of course.
the absolute eternal, of course. Here we get into the whole angelology thing. Angels don't have the knowledge of God except what God gives them. Okay, so is that what you were going to say?
Well, yeah, I was going to say that, and you're absolutely right. But I think you touched on the point here that we are not to take this literally.
Well, absolutely. I
Yeah,
was wondering
this is
actually,
a
though, this
piece
had a
of
profound influence though on the way people did view
Right, it
the
did.
truth of the Bible.
It may
Yeah,
have.
We would say the same thing, that it is not to
Yeah,
be
of course.
taken literally. It is a piece of literature to be enjoyed, to
And-
be just kind of, you kind of marinate on it
Right.
and you enjoy the literature. It was his creative talents, creative juices flowing with biblical context inserted.
Right.
And so therefore, you do have license to give and take and adapt,
So,
but none of this is to be rationalized.
so if you think about it as like a sandwich,
Yes.
where you have the meat is the gospel. It's in the sandwich, but there's a whole lot of other stuff wrapped around it, and that's what the poem is.
Perfect.
Yeah,
It's a very crude analogy, but
no. I think
and I know what you're saying is,
I know that.
could there have been some apostasy because of people reading this? I don't know. Did Milton believe this? I don't believe he did, because of he was a devout reader of the Bible, or devout reader of everything, really, but a devout reader of the Bible. And being a Puritan, they looked at the Bible as the ultimate source of truth. I think what he did here is he's just taking a fanciful approach to the fall of man.
Yes.
So, and whether it led people astray or not, it could have. But while he calls on a heavenly muse, I think he might be the first one to say it's a story.
Yes.
So if somebody came to him, hey, I read your Paradise Lost, and wow, no, it's a story. Don't take it as gospel. Although the gospel's in there.
Developing his character,
Exactly.
Exactly.
characters.
Yes.
And the challenge, and of course he says at the very beginning, nobody else has ever tried this, is for this very reason, is that it could lead people astray. It's a challenge to try to expand on the whole fall of man theme and do it justice. It's a very heady subject and very challenging. And I think he did a masterful job of his descriptions and the presentation of the material, while keeping in mind, and I have to say, I did every so often, I would be reading this and I go, oh my gosh. And my wife would go, what? And I'd go, Adam said that to Eve? And she's like, it's fiction.
Yes.
I know. It's just that it's so good. You think, maybe they really did have this spat.
I think a modern novel would be This Present Darkness. It's about, some of you haven't read this, but it's about the spiritual realm along with the physical realm. It's not gospel.
Frank Peretti?
Yes.
Yes, it's not gospel, but it makes you think, you know, of the possibilities of the spirit world.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on, lines 271 to 282. So Satan spake. So Milton has a tendency to say at the end of a speech, so said so-and-so. He's not saying this person is now speaking. It's looking back. He did speak. All right. So basically he could have put at the end of that 270 a comma and said Satan. But he didn't. So, okay. So Satan spake, and him Beelzebub thus answered. Beelzebub responded, leader of those armies, bright witch, but the omnipotent, none could have foiled. If once they hear that voice, their liveliest pledge of hope in fears and danger heard so oft in worst extremes, and on the perilous edge of battle, when it raged, in all assaults their surest signal, they will soon resume new courage and revive, though now they lie groveling and prostrate on yon lake of fire, as we erewhile astounded and amazed. No wonder fallen such a pernicious height. This is a fairly straightforward section where Beelzebub is saying, O leader of bright armies, God, the leader of the bright armies is God. Hold on a second. Okay. He's basically calling Satan the leader of the bright armies that only God could have defeated. If they hear your voice, I've got a misspelled word in here, and it's annoying me. If they hear your voice, you'll get the liveliest pledge of hope in fears and danger. That doesn't make any sense. I think some text got overwritten in my description. So let's go straight to the text. Where did we go? If once they hear that voice, their liveliest pledge of hope in fears and dangers, heard so oft in worst extremes and on the perilous edge of battle when it raged. So he's basically saying, if they could hear your voice, the voice that they heard at the edge of battle and in great danger, when it raged in all assaults, their surest signal, they will soon resume new courage and revive. So if they could hear your voice, speak loud, and they'll recover. Because at several points in the poem, you're going to hear several characters say, you can't kill an angel or you can't kill a demon. It's just not possible because they're eternal. Although they do say, well, if God got really mad, he could just go and we're gone, like he's Thanos or something, just. Okay, they would soon resume new courage and revive, so they would gain new courage, though now they lie groveling and prostrate in yon lake of fire. In that lake of fire over there, they're lying down and just groaning. As we erewhile, astounded and amazed. No wonder fallen such a pernicious height. Pernicious to me is generally a kind of means evil, but in this case, I think it just means such an amazingly big space. Because if you consider Milton's universe, lack of a better term, you have heaven, you have chaos, and you have hell. And chaos was there before hell, because chaos contained all of the material that makes up the universe. It's just not been shaped yet. And that in itself is a contradiction of the Bible, but we won't go into that.
following up.
Yeah, I mean, because God said it and it was there. I mean, it's, okay. Okay, 283 to 330, Satan walks to the shore using a tree as a cane. He calls to the legion of comrades who lay about lamenting their fallen state. So they're going, oh, what was me? And he goes, come on, buck up. He encourages them to rise. And that's 283 to 330. So that's a short description of what happens in this long block of unhighlighted text. All of Satan's minions rise up. This is 331 to 375. All of Satan's minions rise up, ignoring their situation and their pain, and gather to him in military fashion. These names have been erased from the book of life. Question: are angels' names in the book of life? I don't think so. I think the book of life is reserved for those who believe in Christ.
I agree with that.
You know, somewhere where it says that the angels watch us in awe
Mhm.
because of the story of the gospel. And that's so completely separate from their stories because the angels did fall, but there is no gospel there.
Right.
And so isn't the book of life is like intrinsically tied to salvation in the gospel, which is not applicable to angels.
Right. So, I mean, my question, I mean, everybody knows the answer to the question I asked. Angels' names are not in the book of life. Plain and simple. But, okay. Another contrivance of Milton. Okay, 376 to 380. Muse. He's calling on the muse. Say, muse, their names. Whose names? The names of those who stood close to Satan. So there is a feature of epic poetry that is now being fulfilled. Hi. Does anybody know what that feature is?
Can you repeat the yes?
So there are several characteristics, I should say, of epic poetry. And we're about to encounter one of them. We've already encountered the invocation. By the way, for those who are just joining us, I made a correction early on saying when you asked the question about at the beginning, sing Heavenly Muse, you asked me if that was part of the invocation. I said, no, I was wrong. It is part of the invocation. So I stand corrected. The list, yes. So he's asking the muse to list the names of those who stood close to Satan. And then in 381 to 505, a long block, he lists the names and their exploits. And we won't go into the exploits, but the names, Moloch, Chemos or Chemos, Balaam, you'll hear, some of these are familiar, Ashtaroth, Thammuz, Dagon, Rimmon, Osiris, Isis, Horus or Horus, and Belial. So these are demons next to Satan. And what do you notice about some of them?
Some of the Canaanite gods.
Sorry?
Some of the Canaanite gods.
Some of the Canaanite gods, some of the Egyptian gods, Isis and Osiris and Horus. So basically, all the false gods are demons. I think he's right on that. Okay, down. For those of you online, if you have questions, type them in the chat. I'll see them and I'll respond. 506 to 521. So in reference to that list, it says, these were the lieutenants in order of importance and might. The rest is a list too long to tell, including the Greek pantheon. So the Greek pantheon, demons. 522 to 549. Too far. All these and more came before Satan. I missed an A. Satan. All looking sad and defeated. But looking at Satan, his appearance encourages them. Satan raises his banner held by Azazel, a tall cherub. The banner was adorned with gemstones and gold. Trumpets blared and everyone shouted as if to shake heaven. I was talking to my mother-in-law about this yesterday, I guess it was, and we were talking about the trumpets. I can't imagine that it was trumpets. It might have been more like the sound of a shofar. If you've ever heard a shofar, it's an awful sounding. It's one of the things that the Jewish priests, the rabbis, blow to call people to assembly, I guess. It's just like a ram's horn or something like that. It's an awful sound, but it's loud. So 10,000 banners were unfurled, and all demons moved like a phalanx. You know what a phalanx is? It's a military, it was popularized by the Romans. I think it was the Romans, maybe it might have been the Greeks, but it was a arrangement where you had shields that basically formed an interlocking shield for the whole group, and they would move together as one. Almost like a turtle. They'll cover the shield, so that's the idea. 549 to 604, talking about all these demons that are gathering together. They stand strong, resolute, chasing away their doubt and fear. They march forward and stop before Satan, waiting for orders. Satan looks them over and his heart swells with pride. This army was grander than any in human history. And if I read it, you would see that Milton is comparing this army to some of the big armies throughout history up to his point in time. He just talks about British and Armoric knights, all who since baptized are infidel. Anybody know who Uther's son is or was? King Arthur. Yes, very good. Uther Pendragon was Arthur's father. So talks about Charlemagne. Okay, 604. Cruel his eye, but casts signs of remorse and passion. Satan looks over his followers, and this is to line 621. Satan looks over his followers with remorse and passion, considering how devoted they were to him. Satan prepares to speak. So he looks at them and he goes, "Oh, what a group. My guys." "O myriads of immortal spirits, O powers matchless, but with the Almighty." So he says here, he calls them matchless, except against the Almighty. Oops. He could not understand how they were defeated. Satan tells them that they should use guile or fraud to get the revenge. And he tells them that God intends to create mankind to equal the angelic realm. So basically, he's going to replace the fallen angels with men. And he tells them that mankind should be their target. If there was a soundtrack to this, it would go dun dun dun. 663 to 669. In response, the cherubim lift up flaming swords that lit up heaven and lit up hell in defiance of heaven. 670 to 717. This section is the demons are exploring hell. They're trying to find a better neighborhood, for lack of a better term. They're just looking for anything they can find to make their situation a little more tenable. And what they've done is they're digging down into the ground. Is there ground? And they're finding things to help them build something. So a large number of demons led by Mammon, who is obsessed with heaven's streets of gold. And the description of Mammon is kind of interesting because Mammon led them on. Mammon, the least erected spirit that fell from heaven. So the least erected.
No, I was gonna say that there's an interesting give and take, for lack of a better description, going on here. Because we have a setting that is taking place before creation. And yet it's borrowing from creation in its descriptors.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's being very creative, to me, it's very interesting because it's borrowing from his story,
Right.
history,
Mm-hmm.
things that have not yet occurred, even the formation of military,
Mm-hmm.
that is something that
Well,
happens.
maybe the Greeks or Romans got the phalanx from Satan. So basically,
Very interesting parallels.
yeah. So basically what they've done is they dug into the mountain and found gold. Another group found a river of lava. And a third group found pipes like an organ. With all of this, they built a temple to Satan with pillars of gold and a roof lined with gold. So they're trying to rival heaven.
Yes.
717 to 750, he's essentially saying no temple of man came close in size, wealth, and luxury. And this place was called Pandemonium, the high capital of Satan. A very appropriate name,
Yes.
Pandemonium. Pandemonium. So, all demons, it's essentially what it means. But to us, pandemonium is just a loud group of people or just a uncontrolled setting. Yes.
Can you elaborate why man is like the religious leader or whatever?
Okay, so basically what the description of Mammon as being the least erected means he was the least erect. He was always hunched over looking at the streets of gold. Literally, he was always going, wow. So,
So, is Satan, because they're all kind of rallying their forces here, and making the best of their absolute failure, I guess. But is there a belief among Satan and this group of demons that there could be a future conquest where they could win, or is it kind of the perspective that you see in Job? Whenever Satan knows, he has to ask God in order to cause trouble.
So in book 2 is where they have the discussion about what they're going to do.
Yeah.
And one of the characters actually says, what's the point? God knows what we're going to do. And I mean, that's a bit of truth thrown into hell, which I thought was very interesting. But yeah, we'll get into that, and we'll see at several points. We actually have to go a little bit faster because it's 8:45 and we have 45 minutes to get through this and book 2. So, okay, so 751 to 798. Meanwhile, the winged messengers, by command of Satan, with an awful sound, blew trumpets to proclaim to all that a solemn council will be held immediately at Pandemonium, the high capital of Satan and his peers. Their summons called from every group, by position or by choice, the worthiest. They came quickly with hundreds of and thousands of trooping in. All access was blocked. The gates and porches were wide, but the main spacious hall, like a covered field where bold champions rode in armed, and at the challenger's chair challenged the best of pagan cavalry to mount mortal combat or a joust with lances, swarmed both on the ground and in the air with the hiss of rustling wings in the air as bees in springtime when the sun moves across the sky. They pour forth their numerous youth about the hive in clusters to go fly among the fresh dews and flowers or on a smooth surface just outside their hive. So he's equating these demons with bees. Let's see. So thick the airy crowd swarmed and were organized until the signal given, and what a wonder to behold, their size, enough to surpass Earth's giant suns, were now smaller than dwarves, and a narrow room, unable to be counted, like the pygmy race over the Indian mountains, or like fairy elves whose midnight antics by a forest or fountain some late. So essentially what he's saying is they were cramming all these demons into this big hall. There were too many, so they, of themselves, shrank down in size. So you remember how last time I said that Satan was so big and he could actually make himself bigger and smaller. Same idea with the rest of the demons. They're basically going, can you move over? Can you move over? Can you move over? Oh. Hey, why don't we just shrink down? Okay. But here's the question. They're spirits. How much space do they need?
Yes.
They could kind of occupy the same space, and so I would think. But anyway. So after a short silence, the meeting begins, and that's the end of. Oh. Yeah. Okay, that was the end of the chapter, the book. Cool. So they're about to hold this meeting with everybody present. We'll try to get through book 2. Hey, what's going on here? That's not right. You know, I had it spaced out perfectly with book 1. It's not appearing on my screen. There we go. That'll work. Okay. Just giving away the secrets. Okay. So book 2, lines 1 to 10, Satan sits exalted on a glorious throne and addresses the demonic assembly. 11 to 42, he says that heaven is not lost. And if they rise against heaven again, at least they won't fall any lower. Therefore, they must reclaim heaven. He asks the best way to accomplish their goals by open war or by guile. Lines 43 to 51, Moloch is the first to speak. Moloch, who is fierce in heaven and is fiercer in his despair, speaks. 52 to 85a. I say A and B when there's a period in the middle of the line. So, Moloch proposes open war, saying that the demons won't take sitting around lightly. They're going to get bored. We got to give them something to do. He suggests inventing horrid arms to unleash on heaven. He says the ascent to heaven would be easy. Somebody else is lying him to himself. 85b to 109. What can be worse than to dwell here, driven out from the bliss, condemned in this abhorred deep to utter woe, where pain of unextinguishable fire must exercise us without hope of end, the vassals of his anger, when the scourge inexorably and the torturing hour, calls us to penance. More destroyed than thus, we should be quite abolished and expire. What fear we then? What doubt we to incense his utmost ire? Which to the height enraged will either quite consume us and reduce to nothing this essential, happier far than miserable to have eternal being. Or if our substance be indeed divine and cannot cease to be, we are at worst on this side nothing. And by proof we feel our power sufficient to disturb his heaven, and with perpetual inroads to alarm, though inaccessible, his fatal throne, which, if not victory, is yet revenge. So what can be worse than to live here driven from happiness, condemned to this hated deep place? So basically, things can't get any worse.
That's what he said, yeah.
Except, he says, more destroyed than thus, we should be quite abolished. So if we were to be any worse, we would be gone. And he says, so what do we have to fear? What doubt we to incense his utmost ire? Why not make him as angry as possible? Which to the height enraged will either quite consume us and reduce to... So essentially he's saying, if we make him that angry, he could obliterate us. He could make us so we no longer exist. But, he says, if our substance is indeed divine, if we are indeed eternal, and cannot cease to be, we're at worst on this side nothing. So, again, this is as bad as it's going to get. And by proof we feel our power sufficient to disturb. So he's now saying we have enough power to disturb God on his throne. And if we don't win, at least there'll be some sort of, if we get him a little bit upset, that'll be revenge enough. Okay. He ended frowning, and he looked like he wanted revenge desperately to engage in a fight dangerous to anything less than God's. But on the other side, and that was Mammon? No. Moloch. That was Moloch. Don't want to get my demons mixed up here. On the other side rose up Belial, acting more graceful and humane. So we can imagine a demon being graceful and humane. Belial seemed composed, but it was an act, and he could speak persuasively. 119 to 146a. In the interest of time, I'm not going to read the yellow. I'm just going to go through the analysis. So Belial basically says, I would be in favor of open war, as I don't have any less hate than you, if what was being proposed had any chance of success. She's saying, I would be all for it if we could win. The one who excels most in warfare bases his courage on despair and utter obliteration as the entire purpose of his recommendation. It's nuts. He's basically calling Moloch insane. First of all, what revenge? The towers of heaven are filled with armed guards that render heaven impregnable. Often their legions encamp on the borders or with scout far and wide in the air. So basically, you can't get there. There's angels flying all around. There's battlements. God's got an armory. He says, or could we break our way in by force with all hell at our backs and with darkest insurrection to confuse heaven's purest light? Again, he's saying, he then says, once we're defeated again, our final hope is in despair. We must exasperate God to spend all of his rage to be the end of us. And that must be our cure to exist no more. So Belial's saying, hey, we're going to lose, but if we're going to lose, we at least need to make it bad enough where he's going to make us no longer exist. That's the only way out of this. (146b to 186) summarized, what kind of end is that? If God can give it, would he? And if he wouldn't, has the worst that can happen to us been done? We could still be chained in the burning lake. That would be worse. This guy's throwing a little bit of reality into them. It could be worse. You could be chained in the lake. 187 to 214, he says, therefore, I'm against war, whether it's open or concealed. What good is force or guile with him, or who can deceive his mind, whose eye views all things at one time? He's all-seeing, all-knowing. He's God. He's the Almighty. You can't get away from it. He sees everything we do and can ridicule. You don't need to be almighty to frustrate our plans, only wise. That's an interesting statement. You don't need to be almighty to frustrate our plans, only wise. You don't have to have all the power in the world. You just have to be smart enough to do it. Should we then live like this, the race of heaven trampled, expelled to suffer chains and torment here? Take my advice. It could be worse. There's a theme going here. It could be worse. Since we are defeated by fate and by decree of God, it's his will. It takes as much strength to suffer as it does to do something. And the law that establishes this is just. Doesn't sound terribly demonic, but it is. I laugh at those who want to fight, then shrink back when they know that they will have to endure exile, shame, or pain. Whatever the sentence of the conqueror, this is now our doom. If we can hold back, bear our punishment, our supreme foe's anger may lessen, and perhaps with us so far away, he won't pay any attention to us, satisfied that we have been punished. Then these raging fires will slacken if his breath is not here to fan the flames. So Belial is essentially saying, look, if we just hold back, just wait, bide your time, he'll forget all about us. And what fans the flames? God's breath. So if God forgets about us, the fire will die down. It'll be like a paradise. And more self-deception. He continues on, our eternal essence will overcome the fumes and we will stop feeling the heat. We'll get used to it. And actually, he does say we could get used to this if we bide our time. Belial spoke with reason. Line 226 and 228. Mammon stands to speak. Mammon says that it's vanity to think that they can overthrow God. If God were to take them back, they would have to serve God. To spend eternity in worship of one they hate would be tiresome. I like tiresome, great. In hell, they are free to roam, and they can imitate his light. Mammon argues against open war. 284 to 298. Thunderous applause erupts when Mammon finishes, since they fear Michael's sword. Michael and his flaming sword. Okay. 299 to 309. Beelzebub, sitting second to Satan, rises with a serious expression. As he rose, he seemed like an esteemed statesman. He looked like he was in deep deliberation and had care for the public good. He looked princely, and his face shone majestic through the ruin of hell. So basically what he's saying is his face shone majestically, even though it was really ugly now. Wisely he stood with broad shoulders, strong enough to bear the weight of the mightiest kingdoms. His look drew everyone's attention, and they were as still as night or summer's noontime air while he spoke. He has a commanding presence. Beelzebub says that they must renounce their heavenly titles to be called princes of hell. He says that the popular vote is to remain in hell and build up an empire, that they are still under God's authority. He asks why they even debated war and peace. They tried war and they lost. They should plan and plot slowly. There is no need to invade heaven. So back off. So Moloch is the first to speak, and he goes, open war. And everybody else is going, no. Some of them have a little bit of sense. 344b, which starts, what if we find some easier enterprise? What if there's an easier way, another place, another world, if the prophetic fame of heaven is true, the happy seat of a new race called man that is about to be created. So creation hasn't happened yet. And they're saying, so we heard about this thing. This has been God's plan for a while. But wait, I thought he was doing man as a replacement for those demons. Oops. Little contradiction in their own ranks. The happy seed of a new race called man that is about to be created, and they will be similar to us, though less in power and excellence, but favored more by God. His will was announced in heaven by an oath that shook heaven to its core. That's where we should look first, to learn what kind of creatures inhabit that world, of what substance and what their strengths and weaknesses are. What does that sound like? In the Bible. I'm sorry?
Oh, it sounds like the first three chapters, like the very beginning of the story that we all know is about to get going.
I'm thinking of a specific episode in the Bible.
Is it when the spies are going to the promised land?
Yes. Let's spy out the land. So we need to know who's living there to figure out if it's possible. Okay, we have a question from the remote. Katie Eaton says, the demons hated in hell, but is there absolutely nowhere else for them to go? Why does hell exist in the first place if creation has not happened? Are they just stuck in God's why is there a heart over that? In a godless space dust? That's a good question. But I mean, we go back to, I guess the audio wasn't on at the beginning discussion we had about Milton using poetic license, because before creation, or actually we were talking about how Satan and the demons weren't sent to hell, they were sent to earth. So it was after creation that they fell. Is that right? That doesn't sound right.
Well, we knew that, we said that this took place before creation.
Right. So all of this is before
This
creation.
is before creation, yeah, the created order.
So you had to put them
Genesis.
somewhere.
Yeah, before Genesis. So they are in some space, if you will.
Yeah. So them being in hell is the best thing that Milton could come up with, because it kind of makes sense. They should be punished for what they did. So why not send the demons to the place that people are going to go who don't want to be with God?
That's the other way around. You created hell from them, then you bottle
Yeah.
Okay,
If we're
so he
saying-
created hell for the demons,
Yes.
and okay. So, okay, that actually makes more sense than what few thoughts were rattling around in my head. So yeah, so essentially hell was created for the demons to hold them there, and we'll find out later on in the story, they get out. Okay, he goes on, he says, and how is it best to approach them, by force or subtlety? Though heaven is secure and God is secure in his strength, this new place must be exposed, the outermost border of his kingdom, left to the defense of whoever holds it. It's here, maybe some act for our advantage may be achieved quickly, either with hellfire to lay waste to the whole creation, or possess it as our own and drive away the puny inhabitants. Yeah. Or if we can't drive them away, seduce them to our side so that God will be their foe and may repent of creating them and abolish his works. That would be the ultimate revenge. Interrupt his joy, disturb his peace, and raise up our joy in his disturbance. And when he sees his precious sons lured into joining us, he will curse their frailty and faded happiness, faded so soon. Tell me if you think this is worth attempting, or should we sit in the dark devising vain empires? So 378b to 386a, Beelzebub pleaded his position, which was actually created by Satan. This plan is to confuse the race of man at its root, just to spite God. And he means at its root, well, to confound the race of mankind in one root. So if you get it at the beginning, it'll flow down.
Is there a question I'm stuck on now? It's the main motivation of the demons to get back to heaven or to get back to God to defeat God? Are those separate? Can those be separated as goals, or are they one and the same?
So they want to be in heaven,
Right.
but many of them realize that that'll be impossible. The only way they can get back into heaven is if they repent. I don't know if that works in this case, but they were saying if we repented and we were able to go back to heaven, then we'd have to serve the God we hate.
Right. So destroying God and returning to heaven, basically in that order.
I think at this point, their motivation is to frustrate God.
Now, yeah.
Before, I think they were thinking initially, we need to take back heaven, and it's unbelievable that we ever lost. But cooler heads prevailed, such as they are. So now the plan is it's being whittled down. So they're saying if only there was some way
Yeah.
that we could get back at God and get revenge.
Now, yeah, the focus is kind of like, we're not so focused on heaven now, we're just going to kneel to God to the point of you're going to irritate him and have him collapse on himself, basically.
Yeah,
Okay.
death by 1,000 cuts. 386b to 416. The bold plan pleased the whole assembly. They vote, and with one voice, they approve the plan. Big shock. Beelzebub praises them for their decision. He hopes this plan will lift them up closer to heaven, possibly re-entering heaven, or at worst, live somewhere between heaven and hell. He asks, who should they send to find the new world? Who to tempt mankind? Who can bypass the centuries guarding Eden? Their last hope relies on the success of one of them. So they're basically saying, all right, who's going to do it? Will you volunteer? Please raise your hand. That was 386B. There's this highlighted section, 386B to 416.
I have a question
Mhm.
about Milton and his politics. I think it's curious that he has the demons vote
on who they're going to send. I don't remember exactly what you said about his political leanings, but was he more monarchical in his politics?
He was an anti-monarchist.
Okay.
Milton basically was, and with a small r, Republican. He believed that having a Republican form of government was preferable to a monarchy. That's why he supported Cromwell's government. Although it wasn't completely Republican in that respect, it was closer than the monarchy. If you got more questions I can actually answer, bring them out. Okay. So 417 to 429, Beelzebub sits. And he's waiting for a response, but no one says anything. No one volunteered to go to Eden to corrupt man until Satan himself, with pride, stands to speak. Dun, dun, dun. 430 to 444. Reason keeps them from volunteering. The journey out of hell is long and difficult, and 9 rings of fire surround us. Past that, burning gates. Passing them, there's a void, dark and broad. Past that, unknown dangers. So he's saying, it's not an easy journey. 445 to 466. I wouldn't be worth this throne if I wasn't willing to do what is planned. So he's basically going, hey, if I'm going to sit here, I have to take the risk. I must accept the hazards with the honor of leading. Go and tend to our home and make it more tolerable in case we have to remain here. While I'm gone, don't let your guard down. Against who? Who do they have to guard against? Don't let your guard down. I'm going alone. Da-da-da. That would be heroic if he wasn't Satan. Satan stands 446b to 485. Satan stands to stop anyone from speaking. One of the other chief demons might offer and gain a higher reputation than Satan, but no one wanted to go. And they stood when he stood and bowed to him. .486 to 506. The council ended with rejoicing, praising Satan when dark clouds ascend. It's a shame that demons agree, but men cannot. That's an interesting statement. That's Milton coming out and saying, it's a shame when demons agree and men can't. .507 to 551. The hellish council ends and Satan rises, surrounded by fiery seraphim. They blow trumpets. The demons are more at ease, confident in the plan set forth, which is a false presumptuous hope. There is a wild uproar. That goes down to 551, which is further down. Okay.
Doesn't it get kind of fired up too, because they don't have to go to war?
Yeah. I think they're all going, yes.
Yeah, right. Go, Satan.
Yeah. Go, Satan, go. Yeah.
Right behind
Okay.
you.
Yeah, we got your back, dude.
You do it solo, Jeremy.
552 to 603. I tried to imagine this, but I just couldn't. The demons sing. Okay. While some demons sit around and debate and discuss many things, including good and evil. It is vain wisdom and false prophecy. Another group explores hell for more hospitable climate. They find 4 rivers. Tell me if you recognize these. Styx, Acheron, Cocytus, and Phlegeton. Phlegeton. Yeah, pretty much everybody knows Styx, not just the musical group from the 70s, but the river Styx, famous in Greek and Roman stories of the underworld. Acheron, Cocytus, and Phlegethon are also rivers in the underworld. These rivers are also in Dante's Inferno. He's also got another one, and actually it's also here. Away from those rivers ran Lethe, Lethe, a slow and silent stream. And this stream apparently it has this characteristic in all the ancient literature, because whoever drinks from it forgets his former life. So the idea being that in Dante's Inferno, there are characters. I think I can't remember who it is, but one of the like a minotaur or somebody beats spirits who try to drink from Lethe, because you're not supposed to forget your previous life. That's part of the torment. Past that, a frozen plain, dark with perpetual storms and whirlwinds. The damned are brought occasionally to feel the extreme cold after the extreme heat. That's not biblical. But, I mean, I could see how it would be kind of painful. Have you ever been, I know when I was a Boy Scout, I would go camping, and I'm from New Jersey, so we went winter camping, and it was really cold. And so our toes would be freezing. Then when the cars came to pick us up and their heat was already in full blast, you get in the car, it actually hurts when you start to warm up. So I can imagine how that extreme heat to extreme cold and then back again. 604 to 628. As demons are carried over Lethe, they try to reach its waters to forget what they lost. Medusa, here it is. Medusa guards the stream, keeping demons from the relief of their torment. The exploring demons were dismayed, only finding a universe of death. So they didn't find much. Okay. Moving right along. We're doing okay. I don't think we'll finish book 2, but we'll get close. So 629 to 676. There is a lot in this. Satan, with thoughts with thoughts of his mission, flies off toward the gates of hell alone, searching. He searches left, then right. He searches low, and he searches high. Just like a fleet of ships at sea near the equator when they catch sight of clouds sailing close to India or the Philippines or Indonesia. I replaced the actual modern names with what they had in there. When merchants bring their spices, they traveled on the trading tide through the wide Ethiopian to the Cape, sailing nightly toward the pole. So seemed Satan, flying so far off. He at last appears, hell-bound, high-reaching to the horrible roof to the gate. This is interesting. If you read book 2 and you read about these characters coming out, do they come up? Yes, they do. Okay, good. These two characters, what are the characters at the gate? Sin and death. He finds the gate consisting of 3 gates of brass, 3 gates of iron, and 3 gates of unbreakable rock surrounded by fire. In front of the gate sat on either side a formidable shape. One seemed like a beautiful woman to the waist, and beneath, an ugly serpent, armed with a mortal stinger. Around her waist was a pack of hellhounds, forever barking with wide mouths like Cerberus. This gets interestingly gruesome. At night, they would retreat into her womb and keep barking and howling and eat her guts. Don't read this at night, folks. Far less hated than these annoyed Scylla, who bathed in the sea that parts southern Italy from Sicily. Not uglier followed Hecate, the Greek goddess who is lured by the blood of infants and danced with the Finnish witches while the moon eclipses from their charms. He's really digging into the imagery here. The other shape, if it could be called a shape, as it had no distinguishing edges, joints, or limbs, it would be best to be called a shadow, for it was as black as night, fierce as 10 furies, terrible as hell, and shook a mortal dart, and had what could be called a crown on his head. Satan was now close by, and from his seat the monster moved fast with broad strides. Hell trembled as he walked. He walked, but he didn't have limbs. Okay. It's the image. That's what we're supposed to get. 677 to 680. The unhighlighted part. Satan stood his ground unafraid and spoke. 681 to 688. From where and what are you, unpleasant, grim, and terrible shape, that dares to block my way to the gates? I mean to pass through them, with or without your permission. Mighty bold. Move or face me, leave or taste your defeat, and learn by proof, hellborn, not to contend with the spirits of heaven. So he's calling himself a spirit of heaven. Interesting. Why would he say that? Why would he call himself a spirit of heaven? True, but why would he tell these two critters that he's a spirit of heaven? So they would be afraid. But they didn't buy it. The shapeless thing, full of anger, replied, "Are you that traitor angel?" They know who he is. "Are you the first one who broke peace and faith in heaven, till then unbroken, and in proud rebellious arms took with him a third of the angels who conspired against the highest, for which both you and they are condemned to waste your eternal days here in sadness and pain? And you think you are a spirit of heaven, hell doomed, and you can speak defiance and scorn here, where I reign king and enrage you more, your king and lord? Back to your punishment, false fugitive." This guy's good. "And to your speed add wings, unless a whip of scorpions pursues you if you linger. And with one stroke of this dart, you will experience strange horrors and pains never felt before." Woof. Nice. Got to give that guy some credit. As the formless thing spoke, it grew, another thing that grows, 10 times its size, more deformed and dreadful. On the other side, Satan stood angry with indignation, but unafraid, and like a comet burned that fires the length of the serpent-bearer constellation in the Arctic sky, and from his hard hair shakes pestilence and war. That's 704 to 711. Yeah. 711 to 726. They each pointed their weapons at the other. It's a stare down. They glare at each other, frown, and hell grew darker. The snake woman steps forward. She holds the key to the gates and separates them. 727 to 734. The woman cries out and calls Satan Father and asks what he intends to do against his only son. Curious. And she asks the formless thing what he would do against his father. She points out that God would laugh to see this display. She says God's wrath will someday destroy them both. The shapeless form steps back, and Satan replies, "That's a strange thing to say. Why do you call me father? I don't know you and have never seen you until now." 746 to 771a. She says that while Satan was rebelling, she sprung from his head, beautiful and armed for battle, surprising the heavenly host. Sin, and this, from a philosophical point of view, it makes sense. Satan sins. Sin springs from his head. Yes.
Well, then that's like, when Athena bursts from Zeus's head.
Yes. Yeah, there are mythological comparisons you can draw. They recoiled and named her Sin. So the heavenly host went, whoa, that's sin. And Satan was so taken with her that her womb began to grow something. Despite the fact that they would lose, war broke out and they were routed. So she springs from his head. She says that Satan was taken with her, and because he liked her so much, something inside her grew. And out of her sprung death. So, the wages of sin, death. 771b to 814, she was cast down with the fallen angels and found herself with the key to the gates of hell, with instructions that no one was to leave. So God gives her a job. Take this key, no one's allowed out. She sat there at the gate and gave birth, painfully, violently, to death, the offspring of Satan and sin. Hell shook at the name. She fled, but he caught her. He took her violently, and she grew inside her the hellhounds that torment and terrorize her. And let's see, 814. 814. Save he who reigns above, none can resist, for that mortal dint. Yeah, basically, the end of it's death seeks other prey. Ooh, so close. We'll get there. 815 to 816, way up here. Satan heard her tale, and he became gentler, and he responds. So he hears her story, and he goes, oh, okay. Satan tells him that he's not their enemy, but rather he can set them free. He says he needs to pass through the gate, through the void, to a place foretold where lowly creatures live. He said that when he finds it, sin and death will live there, and all things will fall prey to them. Can you say foreshadow? 845 to 849. Satan stops talking, and they are both happy with the idea, and death grins, happy that he will be satisfied. So death has this insatiable hunger that cannot be satisfied in hell, because nothing in hell can die. So he's just itching to get at something that's living. 850 to 870. The woman says that she was told by God not to let anyone out, and that death will help her if need be. She then asks why she should obey God, who banished her there. She asks if Satan will bring her soon to this new world. 871 to 871 to 887. She takes the key and opens the gates, and they swing open slowly with a loud creaking. She says that she could open them, but she couldn't shut them. They are wide enough to accommodate an army. So this key opens the gate, but she has no way to close it again. (888 to 891). The gates stood open, and when the smoke and fire cleared, they saw the void. And two characters reign in the void, night and chaos. Amidst the noise of endless wars, Chance is there, another character, governing everything. 891 to 942. In the void, all the elements of nature intermix and wait for divine instruction. Satan looks at the void for a while, thinking about his voyage. He spreads his wings and takes flight into the void. He rises boldly and encounters an area devoid of anything, and he falls, and he beats his wings to stop his descent. So he starts to fly up, and then he gets to this place that is devoid of anything, and there's nothing for his wings to catch onto, so he falls. He falls 30,000 miles until a cloud of fire lifts him up. He keeps going up, half on foot, half flying. So there's stuff just kind of floating all around. Yeah, kind of like the old game Asteroids, if you remember that from years ago. There's these asteroids floating around. He's partially running on those things, and he's partially flying. 943 to 967. We have another list. This is an interesting list. Satan fights his way through the void. He hears a confusing group of sounds and approaches the throne of chaos. Sitting beside chaos is night. Beside chaos stood several beings. Orcus, who is the god of the underworld in Roman and Etruscan mythology. Hades, the Greek god of the dead. Demogorgon. Who's heard of Demogorgon recently? Stranger Things, yes. A very weird show on Netflix. If you're not into weird things, don't watch it. Rumor, described by Virgil as having multiple tongues, eyes, ears, and feathers, with her feet on the ground and her head in the clouds. Chance, or Tyche, the Tyche, the Greek goddess of chance. Tumult, Greek female personification of onslaught, battle, routing, and pursuit. Confusion, the Greek personification of the battlefield. And discord, the Greek goddess of strife and discord. And they were all speaking at the same time. Makes sense. It's chaos, after all. Satan speaks to them, telling them that he is not a spy, but a traveler. They accuse him of being a spy. Why would somebody... he's lost and seeking guidance. He asks the fastest way to the border of this realm and heaven. 988 to 1009. We're going a little bit over. Is that okay? Okay. Chaos speaks to Satan, telling Satan that he saw everything. He tells Satan to keep going because he benefits from havoc, spoil, and ruin. So Chaos likes what Satan's doing. This should be close to the end. Yeah, we're almost at the end. Almost there. Another few minutes. 1010 to 1033. Chaos stopped speaking, and Satan didn't wait to reply, but glad he would find a place for a foothold. He speeds off with renewed energy and strength, springing up like a pyramid of fire into the wild expanse through the shock of colliding elements that surround him. Satan forces his way through. His going was harder than when Argo passes through the Bosporus between the moving rocks, or Ulysses on the left side of the boat, scoffing at Charybdis as he steered towards Scylla. He moved with difficulty. Once he passed, and soon after man falls, something strange happened. Sin and death follow him quickly, only by the will of heaven, building a paved road over the dark abyss whose boiling gulf was tamed by a very long bridge from hell to earth. It's by this route that demons easily pass to tempt or punish mankind, except those whom God and good angels guard by special grace. Okay, and the end of book 2, we go rapidly. 1034 to 1055. At last, a shaft of light appears from the walls of heaven and shoots into the void. This is the moment of creation, when chaos retreats as though from the frontier, defeated with less chaos and less noise. Satan doesn't have to work as hard now, and with ease rides the calm waves toward the questionable light. Like a weather-beaten vessel, Satan holds on to the left side, though the sails and tackle is torn. In the emptier waste and something resembling air, he takes off on his wings, leisurely looking at the imperial heaven spread wide around. Satan couldn't tell if it was square or round. There were opal towers and battlements decorated with living sapphire. This was where he came from, and held fast by a golden chain, Earth, as big as the smallest star, close to the moon. There, full of mischief and revenge, damned, and in a cursed hour, he flies there. So Milton's painting Earth as like, here's heaven, and there's a golden chain hang, and Earth is like a Christmas ornament hanging from heaven. And that's the end of book 2. Any questions at all?
I want to make sure I'm tracking. So while they were in conference, they being the demons and all this conversation occurring, creation must have happened. God must have been at work.
Well, it's at that very end of book 2. There's this light,
Right.
and that's creation.
Gotcha. Okay, I just want to make sure I'm tracking.
Yep.
Sounds good. Perfect.
Can you provide some context on chaos and Hades and the spirits that Satan encountered there, and how they fit within the 30 angels that were cast out versus the ones that were not in hell? Like, who were they
So
in that picture?
the impression that I get is that these were not angels, that these are characters or beings who ruled chaos. And chaos was the area outside of heaven where all the material of creation was kept. I don't know if that helps, but I mean, that's the picture that Milton gives. So if you picture, you've got heaven, you got hell, and between it, there's nothing. And all around, oh, sorry. It's just 2 blobs. And all around it is nothing. So Milton decides to fill it with chaos. And he calls it chaos because it's just this unordered elemental morass, just like a soup of, I hate to say primordial soup, but that's kind of the idea, is that all the elements of the universe are there, disorganized, waiting for the creator to organize it. And then at the end of book 2, where it says there was a flash of light and all of a sudden Satan had an easier time going, that was when creation happened and everything came into order. There was less chaos, less noise. So and again, it's not biblical, but it's interesting. It's just fascinating. Yes.
Just kind of bouncing off what you were talking about with chaos stuff. When I was going through that section, I noticed that there was a lot of like references to things that seemed kind of like alchemical and scientific.
Mm-hmm.
And I was reading online just kind of some commentaries, and they were saying that Milton might be critiquing a lot of the materialism that he kind of experienced in his day through that section on chaos, because it has such he talks about atoms and a lot of scientific things. And so maybe he's using that portrait of chaos, the way that he depicts it, to critique people who submit to the ideas of materialism, that there isn't anything spiritual. And how
Okay. So materialism basically being rooted in reality instead of having
like the lack of any sort of spiritual
Okay.
element to the world.
I think that's a fair assessment. With any criticism, critics have said any number of things about different pieces of literature. Some are like, oh, I can get behind that. And some are like, what? There was a critic who, what book was it? some postmodern critic wrote about Moby Dick, Herman Melville's Moby Dick, and said that it proves that Melville had an unnatural relationship with his mother. And I'm like, I read the book. That's insane. So there's a question, were those characters created? Did they manifest on their own? If you're talking about the characters who were in chaos, everything in chaos, I mean, God created it all, so they were created. But I wouldn't put them on the same level as angels. I'll have to do a little bit of research into these characters because I may be totally off on my understanding of them, but my understanding is that they are just in chaos, kind of, because chaos is disordered and a mess. You've got rumor, chance, tumult, confusion, discord. I mean, that's all chaos. So
There's no divine order.
right. So that and it's just a Miltonian contraption. I mean, it's strange. Yes.
Could you kind of compare them to sin and death, not necessarily like angels, but they were beings that had just been put there and tasked to be there for the job? I guess I consider those similar to what all the things were in chaos. Just
Well, so sin and death, Milton's explanation of how sin and death came to be is apart from God creating the angels, and because sin sprouts out of Satan's head and death grows inside of sin. They are not angels by any stretch of the imagination, or demons. They're just offspring. That's a good word. And they are rather interesting. I think this is one reason why nobody's made a good movie of Paradise Lost, is because you really can't picture it. You can't. I mean, it has to be a trilogy at least, but you know. So we're 15 minutes over. I will end with this one statement. On Saturday morning, I read Paradise Regained. It's not that long. It's 4 books. And when I read it, I was like, maybe Charles will let me teach that in the spring. It's really good, but it's a lot shorter, and there are some things that made me go, so it might be worth looking at, but that's for later on. Any questions to close it out? One more question. Anybody? Books 3 and 4 for next week. So I hope you enjoyed this. My mouth gets dry. I talk so much, but I really enjoy doing this. So I hope you get something out of it.
Oh, absolutely.
So
I share something with some other members of the class. You can get it on audiobook and read it along while someone else is reading. It really helps a lot.
I could see that.
If I can use more than one sense in reading, it really helps me. But there's all kinds of, go on YouTube, Audible stuff.